here at Light Reading's 5G transport event in New York City. I'm talking to Brian Daniels of Zayo. Brian, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and this is a perfect, venue to talk about network densification and all the stuff that's going to happen with 5G. One thing I want to get to before we get into 5G so much is Zayo itself as a company. One thing that I guess technology is enabling is that infrastructure is more available to more people, more companies, more users in general. What does that mean for Zayo as an infrastructure provider? Has your customer base changed, or just what has that really unlocked for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I would say Zayo started with this thesis that we were going to be the carrier's carrier, and that was the majority of our customer base. It was the big carriers, the big MNOs, internet cloud content companies, data centers, etc. But that's really broadened. As the infrastructure's gotten further out from this core CBD data center to data center environment, further out to the edge, it's opened up the avenue to enterprise and all different layers kind of down that stack, which is great for Zayo. I mean, we want to be an infrastructure provider. We want to enable enterprises, mid, large, to have access to network and control their own network and really kind of break them free from the traditional services that I think everybody's stuck on.
Yeah, that's a topic that seems to be becoming more and more important, especially for the enterprise market. One of the big promises of 5G is to be able to do network slicing, and they're like, oh, you can carve off a portion of your network. That's going to enable enterprises to offer, maybe have more control over their wireless services, but you're already seeing on the infrastructure side that they're seeking that control and that and those assets already on the wireline side, I guess.
That's right, and the more and more we evolve to the cloud and more of your applications get pushed to the cloud, latency matters, performance matters, and what you can offer via infrastructure, similar to a point-to-point transpoint service, is that known latency, that known number. I think the difference between that layer one physical asset is really just that. It's the security, it's the knowing that you have the infrastructure there, and you can control your bandwidth. You're not really beholden to a company, asking for double the rates for double the service, right? It's really just giving you that freedom and that security.
So now the question that's probably too big for the room, but we're coming up on 5G deployments. Is the network ready for 5G? And if it's not, what needs to happen? Is fiber in all the right places yet?
Fiber's not in all the right places yet, which is a good news story for Zayo.
Right.
We want to build and we want to enable a lot of that infrastructure. I think, depending on the market, as you get into CBD, where we and other providers have fiber up and down every street, great. I think the infrastructure's there. There's a lot of issues around how much fiber capacity is there to support CRAN and multiple strands running to an individual small cell that are eventually coming back.
Right.
I think that'll eventually evolve, but I feel good in those areas that are tight in the CBD. What keeps me up at night is as you get further out from there, and then even as you go to deploy everywhere, the legislative and permit environment isn't such that it's essentially put up roadblocks to deploy.
Okay.
So, we as infrastructure providers and the members of that ecosystem need to continue to push the regulatory environment to standardize fees and permitting processes and drive this second tenant ideology, because, with 3 or 4 carriers densifying in a metro, that becomes a lot of nodes on any given network.
It's interesting because that whole, this argument going back to cities, I do think this is really exposing how behind a lot of the legislative processes are, in terms of keeping up with technology. But to their credit, or sort of to defend them for a second, this is also a technology wave that we just could not have seen coming a few years ago.
Yeah.
They are getting bombarded with requests for small cells, for asset rentals, for rights of way and things like that they just weren't ready for. So I think you're right. What do you think would help fix that? Do you think there needs to be sort of a federal mandate, or do you think the companies themselves maybe need to come together at the table and make it easier for cities to find that common ground?
I think it's both. I think the FCC took a step last week to try and standardize some of the permitting fees, shot clocks around permitting, moratoria, stuff like that.
Sure.
It's a good step in the right direction. But I think the industry has to continue to innovate to make these devices smaller, less intrusive, figure out how we take this densification and all these nodes and make them look better and easier to deploy.
Yeah.
And that's a big issue because you've got 4 different carriers with 4 different configurations trying to come together. But eventually, I think that's what's going to have to happen, and it's already happening. It probably needs to happen faster. But I mean, I'm always of the mindset that everybody together is probably better than the city sitting back saying, "Wow, wait a minute, I have 1,000 permits to put small cells in the right of way. What do I do? What's best practice? Let's just hold."
Right. Yeah. Because it is always too easy for them to say, "Let's wait and figure this out," and it's like, yeah, well, the industry is saying we don't have time to figure this out, and the answer is probably somewhere in between. But it's still a pertinent situation. Okay, last question, just so we can talk about another big. I guess infrastructure challenge is edge computing. How is Zayo seeing maybe its consumption or its customer base embrace edge computing? As we're the applications aren't there yet, but we are slowly pushing things further and further, closer and closer to the user.
I would say we're in this great fact-finding mission now, and we're talking to all the content folks, all the cloud folks, all the people that are going to be involved in this ecosystem, along with the MNOs, and trying to figure out where that edge is. And it comes down to this network slicing, latency rules. I mean, a lot of that still has to be kind of worked through. I know from my perspective, Zayo's uniquely interested in that, and we're striving to figure that out. But I think it's going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on the geography of the metro, the density, the distance. There's a lot of things that are going to be in play there. But do we necessarily think the edge is at every cell tower? No. We think it's probably somewhere in between, at a density of 40 to 50 macro kind of consolidation hubs per edge site. And that's been kind of consistent from who we've spoken to. I think that the next step is starting to develop that in practice and do a couple of use cases.
Right, and then have the infrastructure ready to go at that level. And then, like you said, in some metros, the edge will be closer than others. But in general, that's the theme, getting all those assets in one place so that the computing, so that people don't have to go all the way across geographies to get their games or their video or whatever it is that's driving the network consumption.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Brian, thanks so much for talking with us today. I'll let you get back into the sessions. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.